Facebook, but we still have about another minute to go. But I just want to make sure that everything there is set up. So let me refresh my Facebook page and see
1 minute until showtime.
if we're set up and going. No. It takes a little bit of delay before it goes up on Facebook. So yes, we are. So we're good on Facebook. Hello, Facebook folks. So yeah. Let's see here. There we are. Okay. There. Okay. So Facebook is up and going, and we're down to about 30 seconds before showtime. And okay, all right. And I've already got people saying that they're already coming on and saying that they like my program. So yeah. Oh, I didn't get my spelling in the title. I had a space between the O and the N on the on.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, folks. This is Dave Schmidt. I'm your host here again tonight on the Cosmic Connections. It's the evening of December 16th, and as you can see, I'm not in my home. I had told a lot of friends already I was going to be coming to Arizona for over Christmas time and being there with friends because, that's where I used to live. And so I came a few days early. So, yes, I am. I came today, and I am now in a hotel room in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm going to be for a few days before I go back up to Sedona. And I could visit friends, and the best thing I love to do, I always enjoyed the hiking around the hills and the trails and there around in Sedona. So we don't have that in Florida. Everything's flat in contrast to mountains and hills, that we have in Arizona. So it's interesting because a lot of people think, Arizona, it's all so hot. No, it's not. Phoenix is, yes, but northern Arizona is not because, see, Phoenix runs an elevation of 1,100 feet. Sedona, which is about 2 hours north, is 4,500 feet elevation. And then when you get up to Flagstaff, it's 7,000 feet elevation. And you can go skiing there right now in Flagstaff, Arizona. So it's obviously, it's not skiing in Phoenix or in Florida. but okay, so much for all that stuff. And Blanca, how are you doing on this fine, wonderful evening there in Atlanta, Georgia?
Doing well, thank you. And it's nice to hear you talk about Arizona. Sounds like old times. But here in Atlanta, we've got a little bit of a cold front, I think, because of the storm that's hitting the Northeast. And so that's what we're dealing with over here.
Yeah. Well, we had a little bit of a cold in Florida last week, but actually it's cold here in Phoenix because it only got up to 62 today. Folks, that's cold for Phoenix.
Oh, my God.
That's cold for Phoenix when the high is 62 degrees, but it's supposed to be back up into the mid-70s tomorrow and is what it is. But, and it's funny because even in Florida, we had our cold spell last week, and we had one day we only had a high of 69 in southern Florida, but it's back up. I posted a picture on Facebook. It's back into the low 80s right now in southern Florida. So that's the one thing that's nice. The weather there is just wonderful at this time of the year. So, okay. Well, enough on all that kind of stuff. So, well, Blanca, I think I had already mentioned to you is that this is the December 16th program. And folks, I will not be doing a program for the next 2 weeks. See, 2 weeks from tonight is 2 days before Christmas, and then after that is 2 days before New Year's. And I always don't do the programs right before Christmas and New Year's because those are holidays, and we're just all going to take time off, and so with what we're going to do, so I won't be back until the new year, 2021, before I'm going to be back on the air here. So let me see. No. Let me see. No, December 30th, I think. 14 day. Yes. So we'll have no, I don't do December 30th because that's just before New Year's. So then after that, it's either the 5th or 6th of January. That'd be interesting if it's the 6th of January because that's the big date we're waiting for on the elections issue. So, well, Blanca, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. If anything you'd like to share.
Yes, that's the next date in terms of looking at the electoral vote. And, I know you're going to discuss some of the things that are going on with that process, which has turned out to be quite interesting. And so there's various, like you and I talked, there's various timelines battling here, and we just got to make sure to choose the right one to ride. But that'll be part of the discussion, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and folks, on the workshops, again, the 3rd Saturday in January is when I'll be back starting workshops again. I don't have the schedule out yet, but that 3rd Saturday will it says I'm getting a big echo. Oh, I know why. Let's try that. For those of you that are out there on Facebook, let me know if that fixed the echo. I think yeah. So, yeah. And that, okay. I think, yeah, Blanca, go ahead and talk for a little bit, and let me see if we're echoing there. I think I understood why, because I had a speaker feedback on, and that's what I forgot to turn that off. Okay, Blanca, go ahead and share a little bit more to see if you're echoing.
Okay, well, hopefully that took care of it. I don't hear an echo here, and I don't think the people on Blog Talk hear it. So maybe your folks on Facebook can give you some feedback on that. But
well, there's about a 30-second delay before when I talk before it shows up on Facebook. So let's see, Blanca, go ahead and keep talking a little bit more, and let's just see if you keep echoing. Okay, all is good now. Yeah, you see, there's a speaker on my what's called my live streaming program that I have to turn off. And I forgot to do that. That's fixed. So we're good. We're all good now. Okay. So tonight we were going to give an update of what's happening on all the elections issues, and I'll talk about why that's important and why I keep talking about that. But Blanca, is there anything you want to share with us before we go into the program tonight?
Well, I think that our discussion will go talk about the election specifically. But then we also sometimes step back and look at what's playing before us more on a consciousness level. So I think we can spend some time talking about that as well, because I think for your listeners, that's an important angle to keep in front of it, because I think it's absolutely important.
Yeah. Well, it should be a fairly short program tonight, folks. I don't anticipate going on probably only maybe 30 to 35 minutes on the program tonight, and we're already about 7 minutes into it. But let's go ahead and go. So last week I talked about the importance of understanding the election, because it's what's going on behind the scenes. That this was an election that was not just determining who was going to be the president. This wasn't about Republican versus Democrat. This wasn't about basically conservative versus liberal. This was about whether or not we were going to allow ourselves to operate in an era of sovereignty for the individual, versus we were going to be moving into and being merged with what is called the New World Order, i.e. a strong movement to a one world government. Now, what Blanc and I were talking about earlier last night and again tonight is that we live in a world where there's basically two forms of our world. There's the conventional world that we live in, and then there's the shadow world that operates on behind the scenes. The conventional world is everything that we're presented, everything that comes out that in the media, what we're taught in our education systems, what comes out through the entertainment industry, the things that influence how we think, everything that is presented to us. And then the shadow world is what goes on behind the scenes by the very, very powerful elite controllers that are the extremely wealthy people that live here. When you get behind the scenes, and if you could talk to, off the record, to the three powerful presidents of the world, it would be Trump and Putin of China and Putin of Russia and Xi of China, they would all tell you, we aren't really the ones who run and control this world, because it's really run and controlled by these elite what they call the cabal. They can also be referred to sometimes as the Illuminati, and they are the ones that want this new world order to come forward. That's what really the battle of this election was all about. And remember, last week I shared with you an actual video of George Soros about 3.5 years ago at the World Economic Forum, which is the billionaire club, which is, the movement for the New World Order. He was the one that flat out said Donald Trump and the Trump administration is the number one thing that stands in their way of creating this New World Order, and they were going to do everything that they could to make sure that he was removed. And it's great, in my estimation, to see why there's such strong support that is still willing to believe the fact that there was a massive fraud that took place, in the election. And the media has been covering it up. The media hasn't even touched it, of what is going on out there. And so, but where we are as of now is that this last week, the electors, remember, our presidents are not elected in the United States, they're not elected by popular vote, but they're elected by the electors from each state. And that's how it's outlined in the Constitution. Now, Hillary Clinton has always got on this mad push to say you need to get rid of the electors and go to the popular vote. Folks, in my estimation, that will never happen. Why? Because it's in the Constitution, and the Constitution, Congress cannot amend the Constitution. They can only propose it to the states, and then 35 states have to ratify what Congress brings to them to amend the Constitution. The smaller states, the smaller population states, will never, ever go to a popular vote. Because if it was a popular vote, then presidential campaigns are basically won by the state of California, New York, Florida, and Texas, the heavy population states, and candidates are going to be spending 90% of their time in those states. What this does, by having the electoral college system, it forces candidates to go to a state like Wyoming, which only has 450,000 people but has 3 electoral college votes, is what it does. And they get to have a very strong say in this whole process. So that's why I think you will never see us the electoral college going away, because it would take an amendment to the Constitution. Now, state legislatures can pass a small modification of that, and there are some states that are doing it, and those states are saying that they will give their electors to the candidate that wins the popular vote in the country. Well, it doesn't always change it sometimes, because that's the popular vote would have been possibly what that state already did for, but sometimes it can backfire on them, is because let's say my own old home state of Washington State, which is a blue state, it's going to vote Democrat. Well, if that means that the Democrat candidate gets the electors from that state, but let's say all of a sudden the Republican candidate ends up with the popular vote, then they've got to give their electors to the Republican, because that's their state law. You see, elections, it's in the constitutions that elections are property of the state legislatures. And that's what's going to change here with the electors, because now that the electors basically they have a ballot, and their ballots are sealed. Now, there was one state, Georgia, that announced all of them, everybody there was, before they sealed them up. And they can do that. That's no big issue. But in the Constitution, it says, the electors gather together on the same day, established by Congress that date, which was last week. They put their ballots in a sealed ballot, and then that ballot will go to Washington, D.C., and it's delivered to the President of the Senate, which is the Vice President. Vice President Pence is the President of the Senate. And then it says on January 6th, in a joint session of Congress, of both the House and the Senate, he opens up the ballots, and then they count the elector votes. Now, in the conventional world, Biden has got the majority, the 270 votes for the electoral world. But here's what I have seen, And Blanca has seen this, and others have seen this. And I cannot verify that this is totally accurate, but it appears to be. You see, when you go to a state, the electors have to be certified. And it's not the governor or the chief elections official that certifies the electors, but the state legislature certifies the electors. They are the ones that call the process for their state about how their electors are going to be certified. And supposedly there are 5 or 6 states that Biden won, but they had hearings for their state legislatures and showed the fraudulent activities in the elections. So the legislature sent a different slate of electors. The conventional system was Biden won the state, so the Democrat electors go. But the legislature approved and certified the Republican slate of electors as well. So those 6 states have dual electors. And what does that mean? It means when they open the ballots, there's going to be a discrepancy with who is official on those 6 states. Now, you could have the president of the Senate is going to say he can declare, as it's in the Constitution, that says the Constitution is the state legislature is who certifies the electors. And let's give the example. In the state of Pennsylvania, they're saying Biden won the election, but the legislature certified the Republican electors, not the Democrat electors. Now, probably what's going to happen is it's going to go back to the Supreme Court. And the court is going to then make a decision that they're going to uphold the Constitution by saying, no, it's the legislature. Or they may not want to take the issue on and say, no, it was the voters. And then you're going back to a lawsuit of having to prove the fraud. Or they may say, we are removing the electors from those states. And with that, neither of the candidates have the 270 electoral college votes that they need. So then they go to the next step in the Constitution, and then that is then to basically say that Congress will elect the President of the United States. See, when our founding fathers put the Constitution together, they set up a scenario should something like this happen. Should there be what's called a fraudulent system of the elections or an illegal means, they made sure that it was the representatives of the people, not a single executive officer, i.e. the state legislatures, were the ones who certified the electors from their state. So that's where we are. Now, in the post that I've been posting on Facebook, it said there's a different process that could go through. It could possibly end up when they open the ballots before Congress, before the House and the Senate, that the president of the Senate, who is overseeing the meeting, can say, we're obviously in disagreement here. And instead of sending it back to, the courts, you could have one individual member of Congress rise up and say, I am in objection. I object to these elector votes. And then that motion is seconded. And if that is the case, then they have to vote on whether or not they are going to accept those electors. There was a strong, then you're going to have a Senate that is going to have a Republican majority. But then you're going to go to the House of Representatives, that the Democrats have the majority. But here's what's important to understand. This is going to be a new Congress because the new members that were elected in the November election are sworn into office on January 3rd, the first Monday of January, as it's outlined in the Constitution. And what you have now is a Democrat majority that is much, much slimmer. See, the Democrats lost 15 seats in this last election. It takes 218 votes to have a majority in the House of Representatives out of the 435 members. and the Democrats only have 222 members. And already, if Biden is, quote, president, he's already selected 2 of the Democrat House members to move into his administration, so they may not even be there. There's that possibility. Are they going to resign before them? They probably won't. They're going to hold their seats until it's certified who's going to be the president. That's the smart thing to do. Because if you notice, Kamala Harris has not resigned from her Senate seat. She still holds that seat, and she's not resigning until she's sworn in. And if she's smart, that's what she would do. Because if she resigns before then and the election gets flipped, she's out. She's resigned from her Senate seat. She's not a senator, and she's not going to be the vice president. So you see, so that's the situation that is there. But if that happens, there is a possibility it would only take 5 of the Democrats that come from states that were so obvious that there was a fraudulent election, and they could flip over to say, we're not approving these electors. Then you don't have 218 votes in the House to approve the electors, and you may not have the 50 votes in the Senate to approve the electors. Because see, if the electors are not approved, it's not the fact that they were, the electors and certified. They go to Congress, and Congress has to approve the election. That's what then makes it official that Congress has approved the election of the electors to who the next president is going to be. And if they can't get 218 votes in the House to approve the electors, and if they can't get 50 votes in the Senate, Congress is out. And then that's when it goes to the next step in the Constitution. And then it says Congress themselves, the House elects the president and the Senate elects the vice president. But here's what's important to understand of how it's outlined in the Constitution. The House, it is not going to be 435 individual votes to elect the president. It's going to be 50 votes. Each state gets 1 vote. And what happens there is there are 30 states that have a Republican majority and only 20 states that have a Democrat majority. Now, how is that? When you have 1 vote per state, it means the state of Wyoming, which only has 1 member in the House of Representatives of 435, and there's only about 480,000 people that live in the whole state of Wyoming, they count just as much as California, which has 55 members in the House of Representatives. So you see, that's the check and balance system that is there. And what you have is that the majority of all of these small states that only have 1 or 2 members of Congress, they're Republican majority states. And they all count just as much. So that is a possibility. Now, I just had a comment come up on Facebook. It says if the results are challenged on January 6th, they get 1 vote per state. I just got done explaining Congress votes on the electors and approves them. There has to be a majority vote in the House and a majority vote in the Senate to approve the electors. It only goes to the next step if that is not done, or if it doesn't go to the Supreme Court. It is a possibility. You see, there's a vote that's going to be there by the members of Congress. They're going to vote about how they want to handle this process. And so what's going to happen now is that we're not going to see a lot until January 6th. And what it's going to come down to is there going to be more and more fraudulent evidence that is going to come out. Now, if you've listened to my programs, the last couple of programs, I've talked about the information that comes from Simon Parks, who is an excellent intelligence source. And he talked about what had happened in Germany, where they found the fraudulent servers that were there. And he says they actually caught Gina Haspel, the CIA director, on spot there in Germany when the military special operations people went in there to obtain the servers. They caught her manipulating with the servers. So what in the world is the director of the CIA doing, in Germany a couple days after the election, messing with the election servers. You see, so they caught her in the act. That's what he said. And then the latest thing has been the forensic evidence that's presented in a couple of counties in Michigan, where it clearly shows that these Dominion software programs were set up to be able to flip votes. Is this going to come out as objective evidence either before the courts or before Congress? Now, my understanding is the reason that those 5 states switched in the legislature because that evidence was presented to them. Now, today I was talking with my friend who is a direct friend with President Trump. I've told you about him. He has been personal friends with President Trump for over 20 years. He basically, he doesn't just pick up the phone and call him, but he can if he wants to, okay? And he said, yes, the evidence is very, very solid. They are very much aware of it. But here's what's interesting. And we had this discussion, and I've had this very, very strong inclination to this. It has all the appearance that Trump's team had set up this whole process as a sting operation to catch the corruption in the act. And they started planning this and putting this all together about 3.5 years ago. And what was significant? If you remember, shortly after Trump was sworn into office, and even before he was sworn in, he was designating General Flynn as the director of the NSA, the National Security Agency. They basically are the agency, I should say the intelligence agency. They are the ones that gather all of the intelligence of what goes on in the shadow world behind the scenes for national security. And it was within a month there was this move to accuse Flynn and get rid of Flynn and get him out of there. And why was that so important? You had to understand who General Flynn was. General Flynn was the top intelligence officer in the United States Army. When Sidney Powell said she was going to release the Kraken is the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion. They are the intelligence gatherers for the United States Army. And the United States Army gathers intelligence that can go deeper than the CIA or the FBI because that is their job. Their job is to gather any intelligence that could appear to bring anything that would be a threat to our United States government. So they have the ability to go very, very deep in gathering their intelligence. And General Flynn was their top officer. He was the top intelligence officer. In essence, he knew everything that was going on in what you'd call the shadow world. They said he was the guy that knew where all the bodies were buried. And now all of a sudden, you had a lot of very corrupt people in Congress and in administrative positions that recognized this guy knows what's going on. And they wanted him out of there because he's the one that could have exposed them all. When that happened, the Trump team knew that they were going to come after him and they were going to do everything they could. And it appears they've set everything up in this election to allow the corruption to go forward so you could catch them in the act. I was reading a little post the other day and it says, the similar illustration is, let's say you have a person that is griping and complaining to the police because their neighbors are dealing drugs. And the police says, we can't do anything until we catch them in the act. We can't go in and arrest them and stop their drug dealing until we catch them dealing drugs. You have to catch the criminal in the act to be able to bring charges against them and prosecute them. And there's a lot of appearance that that is what has happened in this election. Because, and obviously the people who are gathering the information, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, Jenna, I forgot her last name, the Trump's team's attorney, etc. They're not going to come out and tell everything that's going on until it's presented before a court of law situation to be able to make a difference, or presented in a legislative session where the legislatures can certify other electors. So I think we're still going to see more stuff coming out, but that's the appearance of what is taking place here and of what is going on. And really what's going to happen is we're probably not going to see a lot more until January 6th. There may be stuff that's going to leak out, but the issue is going to be on January 6th when they open up the elector ballots, and are we going to start seeing, that's where I think we're going to say, to be blunt, the crap's going to hit the fan. Okay, so with that, I think that's all I wanted to say on that. And the reason this is so important to us in the currency exchange is because, folks, nothing's going to happen for us until after we know who's going to be the next president officially. Okay, so Blanca, why don't you go ahead and share with us what your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you covered it pretty extensively, and it sounds like you wanted to have a short program today, so I'm not going to go on and on, other than to challenge people that if they want to do something about this, it again, as we often emphasize, it's a matter of consciousness. So if you are still thinking along the lines that we're going towards more sovereignty, more freedom, more self-determination, more prosperity for all, these sort of values, then you want to make sure that your consciousness is at that level, because the whole matrix is about programming you to believe that this is a done deal, there was no fraud, Biden's in, you can't do anything about it, you're crazy, all this sort of stuff. As Dave was saying, that's the conventional world, or I call it the matrix world. And so the homework I would suggest, because it's going to be a whole year before we talk to you again, if you want to watch the movies, watch The Matrix, and that'll give you a lot of clues as to how to handle your own mind and your own consciousness when you're challenged by a matrix that is totally illusionary. Wag the Dog. Have you seen that movie, Wag the Dog, Dave, with Dustin Hoffman?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it's an older movie, and this is a story of how everything Hollywoodized around a president who's in some sort of trouble, and so he turns to Hollywood to help him out, and they stage all kinds of things, and people believe it. So that'll give you a feel what's going on. And the other one is a very old movie. It's a classic. It's called Gaslight. And this shows a husband who gaslights his wife by making her think she's crazy because she doesn't remember things. She's not perceiving things accurately. It's a form of psychological abuse, which I think is going on right now when, there's all this terrible fraudulence shown. There's videos, and then, the news people are saying, well, there's no, everything's been safe and secure, and secretaries of state are still, certifying, their elections, saying they're good, and all this. So if you want to do something over these next 2 weeks, check out those movies, and I think you'll see a lot of what's going on right now. The other thing I would invite people to check on, I agree with Dave that there are alternate slates of electors that have been turned in. Now, it's a questionable whether all of these got either accepted or acknowledged. The states' names that I've heard is Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
Yes.
There's a little controversy because, for example, Michigan, they wouldn't let them go into the state capitol. So, this is the world we live in. So we could keep an eye out for that. So as Dave pointed out, in terms of the electors, the next date to look at is January 6th. But there's a lot of moving timelines in this arena. We've got, as Dave has mentioned, we have Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Jenna Ellis, who are going the legal route, and there's a lot of evidence that they can present. So far, none of the courts have actually heard the evidence. They just dismissed the cases. So the cases have not been judged on their own merit, no matter how much the news tries to gaslight you that, they've been, that the cases have been disqualified on merit. They haven't. They haven't even heard the evidence. So that hasn't happened, and that has yet to happen. I also agree with Dave saying that this seems to be an operation where a lot of Americans are waking up to the corruption in the election system, period. This is so bad that so many more people are seeing it. And now you're seeing the corruption in the governor's office in these states. We're seeing the corruption in even the judicial system. So we're seeing a lot of corruption in the system, which is something that we've talked about needs to happen. If we're going to go to a new Matrix 2.0, we're going to have to deal with all the shadow elements in the old system and integrate that. If not, we're going to be doomed to take it with us to the new. At least that's how I see it. Now, something that's of interest that I've been looking into. Did you want to respond to any of that, Dave? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. No. Well, I was going to say on the corruption issue, folks, it's going on in both Republicans and Democrats. Now, it just shows up a little more in the Democrats because the Republicans are in the, hold the presidential office, and then they're in the majority in the Senate. But it's going on both sides. And what's important to understand, now, I don't know all the details on this, but it's been explained to me such as if you are in a person of an administrative authority, like a senior elections official, like the Secretary of State or the governor, and you certified electors knowing that there was corruption in your election system, you can be tried for treason and thrown in prison for your life. There are going to be people here. And I discussed that again, with my person, today. There's going to be people here that there's no question that they're going to end up having treason charges filed against them because, folks, I cannot think of anything in the history of America where we have come so close to potentially completely overthrowing our republic form of government, i.e. a government of the people, by the people, and the people totally losing control of their ability to govern their country, and yet the country then comes under the few elite and what they want to do with it. Now, there was a question here that came up on Facebook, and it says, can I comment on what the IMF and the WF, i.e. the World Economic Forum, Great Reset, and possible global debt forgiveness might look like? There's too many variables in that right now at this time to give a good answer to that. But what I can say, the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset is their agenda. The Great Reset is creating a one world government. That means stripping us of our sovereignty, stripping of us of our ability to have our own financial control of our country. And what you will find then is our money has much less individual authority, individual power, and we're basically back to being what I call slaves, folks. We're basically being not, slaves in say of, like it was, prior to, to the Civil War, but we're slaves to the system, and we have very little choice about how we're going to have, what kind of a say we're going to have. And the global debt forgiveness, it's back to how are they going to do that? First of all, I don't see a global debt forgiveness happening just boom, because somebody's got to come up with the trillions of dollars to pay for it, and who's going to do that? If you go into a World Economic Forum and create a one world government, they can basically take over the existing banking system and then just release all the global debt. But I think if there is a global debt forgiveness, I don't see it necessarily going to the individuals. I can see it going to the countries. The country's debt can be forgiven, but there's going to be a lot of very, very, very angry people if debt forgiveness is given to individuals, because here's what happens. People who were irresponsible in creating their debt, overspending their money, going beyond their means are going to be forgiven. And the people who were wealthy or responsible with not having any debt, they don't get anything. So the good people get punished and the bad people get rewarded. That's what happens in a debt forgiveness program for individuals. So there would be a huge political reaction to that. But if you're in a one world government, we don't have any say. Now, those are hypotheticals. I understand that they're hypotheticals, okay? But you have to come back and understand there's a very strong movement by the World Economic Forum, which is the billionaire club, to have this great reset. And there's, to me, in my opinion, there's no question if Biden ends up being president, we're on our way there. We are on our way to being a part of the World Economic Forum and a one world government. Okay, folks, we'll lose our sovereignty. That's how I look at it. That's why this election is so important. Now, another person had written in, can you get a copy of this program? Yes, this program is always saved on my Facebook page after it's over, so you can always access it here on my Facebook page. And then what I also do, I will edit a little bit of it out, and then I send it out as a YouTube on my newsletter a couple days afterwards is what I do as well. Okay, so someone said that you could see student debt forgiveness. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it, but again, you've got very angry people that were responsible. The people who already paid off all their debts, and they don't get anything, and then those who haven't get it. You see, it's like, you signed a contract. You signed a contract when you did student debt. Now, I could see something possibly moving forward where you minimize the ability to have debts, but it's just talk right now, folks. It's just talk. Somebody has to take the action, and it has to go before and become a form of law for that to happen. And you're going to have some very angry people that were responsible people, that they aren't going to get anything out of it. And I think they're going to end up having a huge anger reaction out of that. So, and those are the wealthy people that have the ability to make or break who gets to run for Congress because of the financial contributions. See, so it's like if I'm a member of Congress and I'm voting for this debt forgiveness, I've got the people who are supporting me and helping me to raise money that are pissed off at me, in so many words. Okay, so all right, that's all I got there. Blanca, anything else you want to share with us?
Well, again, in the spirit of giving people things to contemplate until the next show, and this might develop, it all depends on this report that's due tomorrow, December 18th, from National Intelligence. We discussed that executive order that was signed on September of 2018,
yes,
13848. This one was the one where National Intelligence had to do an assessment of whether there was foreign interference in this 2020 election, and their report is due tomorrow. Now, Radcliffe, who is he's the head of the National Intelligence, he's the director, he's already done interviews stating that there was interference, and much China interference especially. And so he's come out, given interviews, but this report from the 17 agencies is due tomorrow. But there's a lot of bickering, it said, about how this report is going to come out, because there's still a lot of politicization. They don't necessarily want to give Trump a real good platform to start talking about what
Sure.
they found.
Yeah.
So there's even rumor that they might not have that report tomorrow. So
Yeah.
We'll see. And depending on what comes out there, there's a lot of implications for next steps. So I would just have people pay attention to that. And there's a couple of other executive orders. I'm not sure. They're interesting, and let me mention them so people who like to do research. One is the Executive Order 13965. That was on November of 2020. This is Executive Order providing for the closing of executive departments and agencies of the federal government on December 24th, 2020. So read that. A lot of people, when they just do a surface reading, just say, oh, they're going to close on December 24th. They're going to give them that day off. People who are used to reading these things a little more technically are saying, this is actually saying that the federal government is closing. All right? So that's, and I'll give you a little context on that. But just take a look and see what you think. And the other one that people are kind of studying with in a studied eye, let's put it this way, is Executive Order 13958. This was done on November 2nd of 2020. This is an executive order establishing the President's Advisory 1776 Commission. I think if people, there's a lot of people who are into NASARA and all that, and you know all the different things that steps that was supposed to take. A lot of people are seeing some parallels in this executive order. So if you have some time to study that, take a look at that. Yeah. What some people are saying, the overarching, very similar to what you're saying, Dave, in terms of this could have been an effort by some various parties, the powers who really control the world, to steal the government and to steal the country. Stop the steal is the slogan. And the reason why there's this contest, people who study a little bit of a deeper history, is because there's the, there's this topic that the corporate federal government has actually been liquidated. And so the struggle is to establish the new government. And so you have, for example, the faction that supports Trump, lots of the military, who want to have, again, a constitutional republic. And then you've got the controllers, the one world government, the World Economic Forum that Dave's been alluding to, and the faction that's supporting Biden, who want, they call it a democratic republic, but they're really talking more about what Dave's alluding to, a more socialistic, communistic. So that gives people who like to do the research, wanting to understand this on a bigger level, some homework.
Yep. So, well, I think I'm ready to call it a night if you are, because I said I'd be a little bit shorter program tonight. We're already 45 minutes into it. So
yes.
Yeah. But
I think it's a good idea.
I think we're just ready to call it a night. And folks, again, there won't be a program for the next 2 weeks unless something huge comes up when I do something special. That's a possibility. But stay in tune, folks. Just know that this stuff isn't over, and there's some administrative stuff that can go on up until, January 6th. And when the elector ballots are opened on January 6th, that's going to be an interesting day, okay? So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight, and I think that we're probably ready to call it a night. And folks, have an absolutely Merry Christmas, okay? Thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye.